Camptown ladies sing a song, doo-dah, doo-dah. It's Stephen Foster Day, folks. Let's cap the card. Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with another episode of Capping the Card. But before we get into a thrilling 12-race Stephen Foster Day card at Churchill Downs, I want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel, whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, weekly programs, and so much more. Folks, we're your one-stop shop for everything horse racing and handicapping. With the Saratoga right around the summer, you want to press that like and subscribe button today. Well, like I said, it is Stephen Foster Day, and we are going to be capping the 12-race card. If this is your first time tuning in, what is the premise of capping the card? I'm going to give you my top pick and my top value play from all 12 races. My top pick should be pretty self-explanatory. My value play is a horse that I think is either a horse to really consider at 6-1 or higher usually, that is worthy of consideration in those horizontal wagers, or a horse that I think might just outrun their odds and has a chance to run up into something like an exacta trifecta that might make your vertical wagers a little bit more enticing. I'll make sure to call out those distinctions on those value plays when they come up. But it is a thrilling card, should be a lot of fun. Maybe some pop-up thunderstorms on Saturday in Louisville. You never know with the weather there, but it looks overall pretty okay today for the weather on Saturday. And like I said, the Stephen Foster highlighting this 4 graded stakes race card. You have a stacked field there. Can't wait to get into that one. But the only way we can get there is if we kick off in the very first race. So let's get into it. Race number 1, baby race, $120,000 maiden special weight for 2-year-olds, going 5 furlongs on the dirt. And folks, with the news, obviously, of the sudden retirement and the health issues of Dwayne Lucas, it is not with sentimentality that I make this choice, but honestly, Track Legend really does stand out on the past performances for the coach. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers go out to the Lucas family as they're struggling during this very difficult time, and obviously wanting the best for the coach and all those around him who love him so much. But Track Legend is a horse that might just get the coach a victory on Stephen Foster Day. This is a $550,000 son of Charlatan. That's notable because Charlatan stands for $50,000. And a lot of his offspring have not been doing that type of sales work. But he has gotten off to an exceptionally good start as a first crop sire. And 2 of his offspring have already won out of 4 starters. So you like to see that. Charlatan and Rock Your World are kind of 2 horses that I think have done really, really well with this first crop already. Leanster is the other. Obviously, we've seen Lenny Lou as the big offspring there. But this one's been working out fantastically leading up to this race as well. And you saw 46-4 bullet work at Churchill Downs on June 18th, a 48-1 gate work on June 11th, a 48 flat work on June 5th. So this one has been working fast and steady. I definitely like what we see out of this one. The third dam is in the AP Indy lineage as well. So you have a little bit of that line breeding going on with this particular horse, but I just like this one quite a bit, and I think that this one could really be a big winner for the coach on the kick things off on Stephen Foster Day. Obviously, I know Wayne is not known for getting his horses ready first time out, but this one looks like it could do it naturally. You like to see that sort of speed in these 5 furlong races, draws a little further outside. Nick Juarez is always an aggressive jockey, and just one, like I said, just really stands out in a field that doesn't have any huge pedigrees necessarily or kind of overwhelming horses. Obviously, the number 4 Icy Light for Mark Cassie, another Charlatan out of an Into Mischief mare with Irad up. That horse is going to be a pretty serious contender as well. If I was playing the early pick 5, obviously Icy Light, a horse I would absolutely be including as well. So don't necessarily think that Track Legend is a single in this first race, but just a top pick. Now, in terms of a value play, I looked at a few horses. A horse like Papa Ken is only 4-1 for Yopon, who's obviously a very big first crop sire. A lot of the Yopons were going for a pretty penny during those yearling sales last year. And there's always been a lot of buzz on him as a sire, obviously in that Uncle Mo lineage out of a Blame mare in the case of Papa Ken. But 4-1 is not really that much value in this race for Asmussen. Again, another one that I would consider using in that early pick 5 sequence. But I ultimately went to trainer who was in the coaching tree, if you will, of Dwayne Lucas, and that is Dallas Stewart. His horse, Spirit of Royal. This one is An interesting horse who is the half sibling to Spiritual Lady, who was a 4-time winner, as well as Drop It, who was an 8-time winner. So this one comes from a productive female family, sired by Global Campaign, who admittedly is not necessarily the greatest first out influence, but this one also, you look at the work tab, pretty solid. 36-4 bullet gate work, or 36-4 bullet gate work, I should say, on June 19th. 48-4, 4 furlong work of 36-2. Dallas has been bringing this horse along well. You pick up Luis Saez, who's probably going to win another riding title at Churchill Downs. 44 wins already for the meet. So Spirit of Royal at 8-1, I just feel like stands really good opportunity here as a value play, maybe a little bit underneath. But again, a Global Campaign who stands for 7,500 going and selling for 140. And that tells you there was something there they liked about this horse. And Dallas tends to have a pretty good sense of when to get these first-timers ready. I like the outside draw as well. All right, well, let's move on to race number 2, which is another maiden special weight race for 3-year-olds and up. This one on the turf, going 1 mile and an eighth. And in this one, I'm going to a pair of Brendan Walsh horses because, honestly, I'm just not enthralled with some of the other options. You look at a horse like Bourbon Society, trying turf for the first time, is the half to Positano Sunset, but is 0 for 11 in his career. You look at a horse like Sardis, 3-1 for Mike Maker. Hasn't gotten the job done the last 2 times on the turf and is also 0 for 11. Listen, if they're going to beat me, they're going to beat me, and I'm okay with that. I'd rather take horses that have had fewer bites at the apple, and that leads me to the duo of the Walsh horses, both Rule 76 as well as Streetcar. In the case of Rule 76 is my top choice. This one just has a race under its belt. I think that was a productive race in a lot of ways. An educational effort at Churchill last time out. Didn't get off particularly well. Was well back. Passed a few horses late. Had Edgar Morales up. Now you're getting Lasix for the first time, and you're picking up Flavian Pratt. Those are 2 positive things. I think this one, again, you like the pedigree. Nyquist out of a Tappet mare. Going 1 mile and an eighth makes a lot of sense here. We're stretching out an additional furlong. I think that's going to help. You get the inside rail. You're going to be able to save all the ground before you tip out, or maybe you find a lane on the inside. But Rule 76 to me looks like a really good value at 8-1. The other horse that I was considering using as a top choice was Astar at 6-1. This is also one coming out of the debut race last time out at Churchill. And S-Mark, the horse that won that race, came back to win next time out as well. This one broke from the inside rail. I think breaking further out might not be the worst of all things. Ben Curtis up on the mount again. 4-trainer Graham Motion. Oscar Performance is the sire here. So there's a lot of things I like. When you talk about Graham Motion, you talk about Oscar Performance, Ben Curtis on the turf. There's things I like. This one has a race under its belt, escapes the inside rail. 6-1, another horse I would absolutely consider using in a few different ways. But if my top choice is 8-1, my value play was going to be a little bit higher than that, and that took me to Streetcar for Brendan Walsh as well. This one with Irad Ortiz Jr. up. Listen, I don't think you're going to get 10-1. To be clear on this horse, who's been working out very well, love that gate work back on June 13th, 47 flat gate work. That's something my good friend Barry Spears always likes to point out. He goes, always like to see strong gate works and fast gate works for horses making their debut. And sometimes it just comes down to who gets out of the gate well and gets into early position. But this one is the full sibling to Proctor Street. And that Proctor Street was a horse that won first time out going long at Horseshoe Indy, stepped up and won an $80,000 optional claimer in her next start at Saratoga, and then went to the Winter Memory Stakes, finished 5th that day, just recently came back from the bench to finish 2nd to Viva Vivu last time out. So Proctor Street's a talented runner and a horse I was always a fan of. So the fact this one's a full sibling, there's plenty of precocity there. You get Irad up, man, 10-1. If you get anywhere near that price, that would be fantastic, I think, on this horse. That's one I would consider a serious win contender in this particular race. Well, let's go to race number 3, which is a $125,000 optional claimer for 3-year-olds going 1 mile and an eighth. Interesting race here. And you know, you can look to the outside and Belmont's horse Excite. And Belmont has been on absolute fire, whether it is at Churchill Downs or Belmont at the Big A. The Mott Barn has been firing on all cylinders. He's winning 36% of his entries down at Churchill. He's winning something like 28% up here in New York. And these are not small sample sizes either. He's winning, and he's winning at all levels. Excite has Irad Ortiz Jr. up. This one just broke its maiden last time out. I do wonder about stepping up against better competition, but it should be pointed out this one Also popped first time going long on the dirt. Sired by Speightstown, which is always an interesting up top influence when you talk about going long, out of a Medaglia d'Oro mare. The Medaglia d'Oro influence makes sure that you have that distance influence underneath. But this one clearly likes to get out up on the front end, is going to be a little bit wide. There might be some other speed in this race. Certainly in the case of the number 4 Shangri-La Road, I think could potentially be that speed, the challenge. And you even look at a horse like Best Friend Rocket for Lucas. That one usually runs its best races when pretty forward. So those are ones to consider. I ultimately landed on a horse in the terms of my top choice as the number 6 Fountain Lake. Forward trainer Johnny Ortiz. This one, I like this one a lot. Ran in the slop, 2 back, broke its maiden, gate to wire fashion with Julien Leparoux up on the mount. Came back, and this is what I loved about it. Ran an 87 buyer, and you might go, well, maybe the horse was popped over a wet track, 87 buyer, career best. The horse had been improving. The horse had been moving up every single race. 71, 80, 87. So there was kind of a progression in terms of those buyer speed figures. Next time out, it's first time against winners at this level, going 125. And the horse didn't break at all, was in the back of the field, was 7 wide, and still managed to go from 10th, last place, all the way to 2nd with this furious charge and just lost to Hypnus at the odds of 24-1. Now, you're not getting 24-1 anymore. You're getting 3-1. I know Johnny Ortiz is only a 9% trainer. I know Julien Leparoux is only a 7% jockey at Churchill Downs. Those two at least have a little bit of success together this year. I just think this one is showing a lot of versatility because the buyer speed figures didn't drop off at all. Now over a fast track in that next start, that 125,000, we go 87, 86. So the horse is shown can handle a wet track, can handle a dry track, can go to the front, can also sit off and pass horses. I like all that versatility that you get there with Julien now. If this one just gets away a little bit better, so it's more of a mid-pack trip, I think this is a pretty serious horse that it's got a big late kick. I think he'll appreciate going a mile and an eighth, so this is my top choice. In terms of the value play, I'm going to land on a last out maiden winner, and that's the number 3, So Sandy, 10-1 for Cherie DeVaux with Jose Ortiz up. This one is a last out maiden winner, like I said, gate to wire fashion at Horseshoe Indy. Obviously stepping up a little bit now, facing tougher company at Churchill Downs, I should say, not Colonial Downs. But I like a lot of things about this horse. Omaha Beach up top, out of a Tappet mare. I like that. This one has some expectations. $35,000 is the standing fee for Omaha Beach. This one sold for $535,000. So there's some expectations with this horse. And it's interesting. Cherie's kind of brought this one along now. We get Jose Ortiz up this time. And we're second back from a pretty lengthy layoff. The horse didn't run from January until May. So got that win off the bench. Now we're stepping up, should have some more ceiling to get to. And ran a career best 79 buyer. I think there's another step forward this horse can take, second off the bench. So that's kind of be where I go and look at a little bit of value in this race at 10-1. I think that's, like I said, nice horse to consider, including maybe up top in your horizontals, maybe just more of an underneath play. Well, let's go to race number 4 on the card, and that is a $62,500 claimer for 4-year-olds up, going 7.5, not 7, not a mile, 7.5 furlongs on the main track. And this is a tough race. This is a tough race. I looked at a lot of horses. You know, there's a horse like Loco Obario that I kind of like in this race for Will Walden. That horse is at 8-1. I really took a long look at that one. I ultimately landed on Classic Car Wash. I looked at the Joe Sharp El Magnifico 3-1. There's something I don't like about this. Sharp claims this horse from Asmussen on a $80,000 optional claimer on May 9th. Claims the horse for $80,000. Runs the horse in a $114,000 allowance. The horse wins for fun. You think, man, this horse is what a find by Joe Sharp. Now he's dropping the horse back into the claiming, putting the horse in for a tag for $62,500. It's just curious. Now he's going to make his money back for sure, because if this horse is likely to get claimed coming out of that allowance win, and if you win and get the claim money, hey, you're doing really good because you won that allowance race as well. So, financially, I understand it. Maybe you're playing the claiming game. Something just doesn't smell right that you would drop a horse back in for a tag after you just win an allowance off of the $80,000 claim. So for me, I'm just a little skeptical of that one. And so I was looking for alternatives. Classic Car Wash is the horse that I came up with for Mark Cassie, who, Cassie's been having a good year all over. Had a lot of really good runners. Obviously, a lot of good 2-year-olds last year, 3-year-olds this year, both on turf and dirt. But with Classic Car Wash, always liked this horse. Going back to those nice races down at Tampa Bay Downs, was never quite good enough to obviously make it to the Derby, but was on the Derby trail for a little bit and has turned into, I think, to a pretty nice horse. Won a race 3 back at Oaklawn Park and came back from a little bit of a freshening and $100,000 optional claimer. Now we're dropping in for the tag for the first time. I think this makes a lot of sense. IRAT is up. Yes, the horse is to the outside, but has enough tactical speed to be able to get over, save a little bit of ground into that first turn. Great closing kick as well. I like the 7.5 distance as one actually going the 7 before, which I think is critical to point out, down at Gulfstream Park back in 2023, but has at least shown the ability to do it. I think on the speed figures, this one certainly looks like he fits in this race and gives you a little bit better value of 4-1. Now, if I go from the outside to the inside in terms of a value play, this is going to the number 1 pure class at 12-1 for David Fox, who, 1-for-1 at Churchill Downs, but more importantly, this one is actually coming out of a stakes race, but ran in a $50,000 claimer 2-back at Gulfstream Park and won that race. So now coming in running for the 62.5 tag, not all that surprising. This one has been keeping much better company, quite frankly, than a lot of other horses in this race. I mean, 3-back was running in the Pelican against Nutella Caramel Chip. So there's some nice back class with this horse as well. Like I said, won that $50,000 optional claimer, came back, ran at least decent in that big drama, ran 4th in a 6-horse field. The horses like Shaq Diesel and Air Combat has been training beautifully at Churchill leading up to this, 47-3 bullet work on June 20th. So I think Fox has this one pretty tightened up. 12-1 on the morning line makes a lot of sense. Horse should be able to save some ground on the inside. Doesn't need to get to the lead. Probably going to sit more of a mid-pack and make a little bit of a run. Maybe it's one you consider using underneath, but I just think that horse presents good value at the morning line price. Well, let's go to race number 5, which is a $50,000 starter allowance for 3-year-olds and up, going 6 furlongs on the dirt. And this was a tough race because I'll be honest, I almost used my value play as my top choice as well. And we'll get to backtrack in a second. But I couldn't quite pull the trigger on that one being the top choice. Again, I'm not necessarily enthralled with I wasn't enthralled with a horse like Lambeau for David Jacobson. Just moved over to the Jacobson barn and ran a big one last time out. You wonder if he can replicate that effort. Jose Ortiz remains up on the mount. Certainly, if that one runs back, it could be pretty dangerous in this spot. A horse like Summon Your Courage, 2 for 21 lifetime. So I'm always a little bit skeptical stepping up from a victory last time against Claiming Company. A horse like Honest Owl and the numbers just not quite there, although I'm notoriously never on the right side of Kenny McPeak horses. But the number 4, 32 Chunk, interesting horse who debuted on the turf, going short for 6.5 on the flat at Santa Anita for trainer Mark Glatt. Didn't really take to it. They stepped the horse up into onto the dirt, I should say, and dropped the horse in class to a $35,000 restricted optional claimer. Horse wins for fun by 8.5, runs a huge race in terms of, an 88 buyer speed figure, kind of runs off the screen, wins by 8.5 lengths. This horse has outstanding early speed, and sometimes it's just that simple. You get Antonio Frezu, who's a West Coast jockey, up on the mount there. If this horse can run back to that 88, I think this horse can win. Maybe gives you a little bit of value. It feels like a horse that's not going to be over bet necessarily. And those West Coast horses may not always attract as much money in the Churchill pools. So I do think 32 Chunk at 4-1 might even float up a little bit. The other horse I obviously am using as my value play, who I took a long look at as a win contender, is Backtrack. 6-1 for Joe Sharp with Irad Ortiz Jr. up on the mount. Irad, I just think, has a lot of really live mounts on Saturday at Churchill Downs. But this one won in gate to wire fashion 2-back at Keeneland going 6. And it did it under Jose Ortiz that day, went off as the even money favorite, beat a horse like Redacted, who came back to win next time out. And then Sharp stepped the horse up against starter allowance competition at Churchill, but going a mile. And I think that's just too much for the horse. I think, the fractions were still pretty strong. I mean, here's the thing. You look at those fractions between the 6 furlong race he ran 2-back And the mile race he ran last time out, they went almost the exact same fractions to the half mile. They went 46 and 2 basically in both of those races. And one time that horse just kind of stopped going a mile, and the other time he was able to finish off pretty strong and beat a horse who came back to win next time out. So showed a little bit of grit going 6. So I think now cutting back to 6 furlongs is going to be exactly what this horse wants. 6-1 on the morning line, good early speed. Again, I just think there's a lot to like with this one. This one can break up on top, maybe maybe breaks a little bit better than 32 Chunk, who's not running against optional claimers anymore. Maybe you end up seeing a horse like Backtrack at 6-1 get home. But those are the two that I really zeroed in on in race number 5. Well, let's head to race number 6 on the card. $120,000 maiden special weight for 3-year-old up fillies and mares going 6.5 furlongs on the dirt. And for this one, yes, we went back to another Brendan Walsh horse with Pretty in a Dress at 6-1 on the morning line. Now, here's the thing. This one is out of the mare What Dreams Are Made Of, who is 0 for 8 producing first out starters. But she also did throw a horse like Carolina, who, oh, by the way, won the Ogden or won the Chuvie, and who, oh, by the way, won the La Troyenne, and who, oh, by the way, won the Acorn. And yes, finished second in debut and then won next time out. So there's at least some precocity. That one's obviously sired by Curlin in terms of Carolina. In terms of Pretty in a Dress, we're out of Constitution, who's a good first out influence generally. So I think there's every reason to expect this one is pretty cranked up, especially when you look at those last two workouts. 47 flat, gate work, bullet, 47 flat, first of 46 that day on June 10th, and then follows it up with a 5 furlong bullet, first of 10, minute and 1 at Keeneland both times. I rad up. Brendan is somebody who, again, he knows how to get him ready first time out, gets Lasix. I just think this one makes a lot of sense. And I think that 6-1 presents some actually nice value in this particular race. A horse that I did take a long look at, who I want to mention, who's the exact same price in terms of being 6-1, is Violet Irene. Really like this horse for Jennifer Tooley, who is the trainer, breeder, and owner. I'll love to see that as well. This is a horse that finished second in debut by only a head to Her Laugh. Her Laugh, of course, came back to win the Untappable in her next start. So lost to a really good horse. The thing is, that was all the way back last November at Churchill Downs. Horse has not been seen since. It's coming back from a significant layoff. But man, if this horse can run back to that form, that could be pretty dangerous. Now, the works don't necessarily overwhelm you leading up to this. The pedigree is not that overwhelming, instilled regard out of a formal gold mare. So again, not an overwhelming pedigree, but showed a lot of ability in debut. And gosh, if she can harness that again, I want to get a little more than 6-1 though. Man, if she floats up to 8-1, 10-1, that's an interesting horse to use. Ultimately, though, the horse that I ended up using as my value play was number 9, Lost and Found for Will Walden. This horse is also coming off a little bit of a layoff, hasn't run since December at Fairgrounds over a sloppy track, ran second that day and just lost to an all of Juju. And, got to the lead and then just kind of got tracked down late, has very good early speed. Will Walden winning 31% of his entries at Churchill Downs. You use Flavian Pratt here. That's a pretty big jockey upgrade, in my opinion. This one's also been training very well, getting ready for this. Again, a 47 flat bullet work at Keeneland, a minute and 2 bullet work at Keeneland going 5 furlongs, another 5 furlongs at Churchill Downs, 8 of 19. So this one's been training well, getting the screws tightened. Walden is very good off these types of layoffs, very good placing his horses in maiden second starts. Liam's Matt out of a Tappet mare. So I like the 6.5 for this one. And I just think at 10-1, you're getting really good value with a horse like Lost and Found. Let's head to the start of the stakes races, shall we? Race number 7, the Fleur de Lis. Folks, this is a tough race because it's a 5-horse race and there's you got to make a decision. Either you think Thorpedo Anna is the goods and she's going to bounce back from that terrible effort last time out, or you think she's just over the top and she's, to use the phrase, ready to be a mom. And she's kind of done her best racing. And I was right on her last time. The last time out, I knew that Brown duo. I knew Randomized and Raging Sea were going to gang up on her. That's exactly what they did in that La Troyenne. I did not expect her to run as poorly as she did, where she just completely gave way. That said, she was bumped severely going into the first turn. I think that threw her off her game a little bit, might have knocked the wind out of her a little bit. Who knows? But, she just was not herself that day. But the reality is you cannot deny what the numbers have shown, which is really since that Travers, she's been not quite the same horse. She barely won the Cotillion. She goes and wins a depleted Breeders' Cup Distaff, I would say, where you didn't have Idiomatic, you didn't have a Dare Manor, and Raging Sea, who of course beat her last time, was kind of forced into chasing and tracking her, which is not her game. She comes back in the Azeri and beats Free Like a Girl. Okay. Comes back in the Apple Blossom and beats Free Like a Girl again. Okay. But runs a 95-93. And then that La Troyenne just, was not her day. Now, I think she's got the best early speed in the field. Kenny's got her cranked up and she's working out fantastic. If Brian just gets her out there on the front end, maybe she goes to gate to wire like she did in the Breeders' Cup Distaff, and it just doesn't even matter who's chasing her at that point. But I do worry that she's a little over the hill. And at 3-5, that's just such a short price to take on a horse that ran so poorly last time out. Now, my good friend Sarah El-Badwi sometimes says, hey, when they run that poorly, you just got to assume it. You just draw a line through it. That's so poor, you can't even believe it. And maybe that's the case. But for me, I'm going to try to beat her. And I'm going to try to beat her with a horse like Jin Jin, who I think could sit a similar trip to what she did in that double dog dare. I love that she draws to the outside of Thorpedo Anna. I think Jose Ortiz is going to have her very close to Thorpedo Anna. And I think it's going to be a replication of what happened with Just FYI. Now, hopefully it's not as dramatic where Just FYI, really seemed to have, really struggled, seized up maybe a little bit that day and just, was fanned off, but appears to be okay. But Jin Jin inherited that lead and just did not give it up then. And, had a pretty decent group of horses chasing her, like Tarifa and Candied. That race came back fast, 96 by her speed figure. She comes back in the Shawnee, loses to Royal Spal, admittedly, wasn't able to get there against her, but runs a 94. I think she sits a very similar trip at 7-2. Brendan Walsh has figured something out with this horse because this used to be in the Cox barn, and they ran this horse more off the pace. And Brendan's put this horse up on the front end, and man, she's really figured things out. Jin Jin seems like a horse that, again, at 7-2 might be a good value play. Royal Spot, 4-1 is the other obvious choice here. I think, winning that Shawnee, winning the Heavenly Cause before that, the mile and an eighth maybe is a little bit of a question for a horse that's stretching out, but that effort last time out, and the Shawnee was able to get stronger late in the race. Rudy Brissett, always good at Churchill Downs. I don't necessarily love him in these dirt route races, but does have some good fillies and mares here. Horse showed good versatility, winning gate to wire in that Heavenly Cause, and then coming from well off the pace in the Shawnee last time out. So I think those are the two that you're going to target in on to try to beat Thorpedo Anna. Maybe a horse like Taxed, who likes to come from well off the pace, can make a late kick, should appreciate the mile and an eighth ground. Always like that horse for Randy Morris. That was a great claim, too, as well. That was a $50,000 claim at one point, who's gone on to have quite a career winning the Black-Eyed Susan and winning some nice races against Allowance and Optional Claiming Company, but being, multiple times stakes placed throughout. So not bad, $50,000 claim, who's now $1 million earner on the track. But like I said, this is one where you got to make a choice. Either you single Thorpedo Anna or you try to beat her. I'm going to try to beat her with these two. I might look foolish, but it's the way that I'm going to try to play it. Well, let's go to race number 8, the Tepin Stakes. And this one is a nice turf race, real nice turf race. I think you could look at a couple of horses here. Certainly a horse like Lush Lips. Love this horse. Usually does her best work up front. Last time out was really problematic early in that race. And, eventually Pratt got her settled down and she made a run to get the second, but nobody was beating Nitrogen that day. And she lost Nitrogen 2 back as well in the Florida Oaks. Now she's escaped Nitrogen, but she's run into her stablemate Vixen, who she did outfinish in that Edgewood last time out. But I would say the same thing's true about Vixen. She's been running up against her stablemate too. And this is a horse that won the Sweetest Chance, won the Here Comes the Bride, and then finishes second in the Appalachian, and then finishes second or third by a nose in that Edgewood. So, Mark Cassie has just a lot of really good turf mares and fillies, I should say, as they're 3 years old. Vixen, I think, makes a lot of sense in this spot. I think she can sit kind of more of a tracking trip off the pace. Lush Lips is going to want to go. I think a horse A couple of other horses might challenge her. I think something stronger who's stretching out from sprinting 5 furlongs has good early speed. I think a horse like Ninth Island is going to want to be pretty forward as well. And if that's the case, Vixen can tuck in behind that and then make a little bit of a run as she did in Here Comes the Bride. So I think the Vixen just sets up a little better for her in that case, and that's why I like her a bit more than Lush Lips at 2-1, though it would hardly surprise me if the favorite won this race. I'm going to try to beat her. In terms of a value play, favorite to you is a horse at 10-1 for Phil D'Amato that I like. And I know typically I fade West Coast turf horses coming east. D'Amato is really getting more established in Kentucky, though. This one's actually bred at the University of Kentucky and is doing the stretch out from 6 furlongs. But this horse has an off-the-pace running style, had been jockeyed by Umberto Rispoli, but Frezu rode this horse the first 2 times out, gets back aboard now that he's in Kentucky. And again, pretty modest pedigree in terms of Divisadero by Kitten's Joy out of an Arch mare, only sold for $17,000 at the Fasig-Tipton October sales back in 2023, but has already won nearly $90,000 on the track. So this one broke its maiden and came back and beat winners next time out. You like to see that. And yes, stretching out, but I think has the right sort of running style to stretch out. And again, can track the pace a little bit, similar trip to Vixen. I don't know. I have a feeling this one's sitting on a pretty nice effort, has done nothing but really improve the last few times. And again, she's so used to those blistering fractions out in California. I think she's just got really good speed and could really appreciate the extra ground that she's going to get on Saturday. So for me at 10-1, she's a little bit of an interesting play, maybe a little bit more of an underneath play, but one that I would absolutely consider in the spot. Well, let's head to race 9, the Kelly's Landing, grade 3, going 6.5 furlongs on the dirt. And this is a tough race. Booth, I've been playing against Booth the last couple of times out because I was somewhat incredulous that this horse just suddenly got 20 points better overnight between the Beverly and all of a sudden between the Beverly Turk, or the Byerly Turk, I should say, I'm sorry, at Oaklawn and the Commodore. The horse suddenly went from running 80s to running 105s. Now, Eric Asmussen seems to bond with this horse for his dad, Steve, but it's one of those things where, yeah, he just goes out up front and he goes. And if nobody challenges Booth, then game over. He's 2-1 in this race. I do think a horse like Roll On Big Joe has very good speed, and I hope Julien Leparoux uses it. I think a horse like Auto the Conqueror has excellent speed. I hope Flavian Pratt decides to use it. Another one trained by Steve Asmussen. And that's always the question is, are the Asmussen horses actually going to press each other? But I think a Roll On Big Joe being there makes things a little bit easier to maybe press Booth. Maybe if you press him, he's not quite the same horse. I'm going to try to beat him, and I'm going to try to do it with Dr. Venkman, who's a horse I've always liked. 5-2 on the morning line for Mark Glad, Antonio Frezu up. This horse coming off nearly a 10-month layoff last time out in the Tropical Bend, loses to Nisos, but finishes second that day, and second by a distance as well, and runs a 97 Beyer speed figure. This horse just doesn't run bad races. I mean, in his career, he's 6 for 7 hitting the exacta with 3 victories. His lone loss, or his lone time not hitting the board, was going 1.25 miles, which is not what he wants to do in the Pacific Classic. Every other race you look at, 91, 94, 97, 96, 99, 96, 97. That's his career numbers. He comes off the bench and runs a 97. I think he could take another step forward. 5-2. Hey, listen, I think Booth is going to take a lot more money and be a lot lower than 2-1. As a result, I think Dr. Venkman's going to be better value. I'm going to use him. I don't love the inside rail going 6.5, but I know this one's got more than enough foundation. Whereas Booth going 6.5, maybe I have a little bit of question marks there, even though he's won going that distance before. He does seem like he's just really nailed this 6 furlong distance recently. Listen, maybe he can win 5 in a row and make a believer out of me, but I'm going to try to beat him again at a short price. In terms of where I'm going to go for value, there wasn't a horse that I loved in this race from a value standpoint. The closest I could get to was Durante for David Jacobson with Jose Ortiz up. I have a hard time trusting Jacobson horses in terms of their form because it comes and goes. That said, Banishing had been pretty consistent for a while. This one's been turning in some nice efforts recently for him, although he did have a couple of duds, particularly 4 back in the Eclipse. Admittedly, wasn't necessarily the best trip that day, but still, was one that, like I said, maybe a blip in the radar. But you look at that, Lake Hamilton was a distant third to a horse like Skelly, comes back, runs in a $175,000 optional claimer, finishes third to Roll On Big Joe and Caramel Chip. And then last time out in the Aristides, at Churchill Downs, Jose gets him out pretty close to the pace, and they go pretty fast up front, 20 and change, 43 and change to the quarter and half. And all of a sudden, the race kind of comes back to him a little bit, and he ends up capitalizing on it. Listen, Durante's a nice horse. I've seen him up here in New York a bunch. He's won some nice races, won the Bold Ruler back in 2023. So absolutely more than capable of winning in this spot. But 8-1 seemingly is like decent value for a horse that does have some nice races, though on the speed figures is going to need to get a little bit faster. Well, let's go to race number 10, which is the Wise Dan. God, I love Wise Dan. But also love this race. Going a mile and a 16th on the turf for 4-year-olds and up. Where am I going in this race? Tough race. You got Mercante. That horse has just become a new horse with J.D. Ramos aboard, with Joe Ramos. Brian Nippenberg does a great job managing this one, has really moved forward, finished second in that Turf Classic to Spirit of St. Louis, then comes back to win the Arlington over Brilliant Birdie and Laganos. Again, a little bit like Booth. I want to try to beat this horse, but honestly, he's not giving me a lot of reasons to do it recently. I do wonder if a horse like Brilliant Birdie just gets a little bit of a better trip. This horse usually likes to come from off the pace. Last time out, just kind of inherited the lead. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think a horse like Seminole Chief is going to want to go to the lead. This horse has good early speed. Doesn't always show it, but I think Luis Saez is going to be aggressive with this one, get this one out of the gate. And if Seminole Chief, particularly from that far outside, breaks and gets up front, then Birdie has a target to run at. I think can sit a pretty nice trip for Cherie DeVoe and Brian Hernandez Jr. I just think this one, 3-1, admittedly not a very big price, but is going to be a better price than Mercante, who I'm going to try to beat. And like I said, is ultimately going to end up being my top choice there at 3-1. But again, a horse that, has won the Byron Station, has won the Gun Runner, has won the opening versus, has won multiple stakes races and won the American Derby on this day last year. So again, a very talented horse for Cherie. Very consistent runner, has actually been moving forward the last couple of times out as a 4-year-old, 91, 94, 95. So another step forward, I think puts this one in the winner's circle against Mercante this time out. The horse that I really like from a value standpoint, listen, I like a horse like Fort Washington a lot for Shug McGahee. Super consistent horse. The speed figures absolutely are more than good enough. I worry that there's not a ton of speed in this race, and this one's a bit more of a deep closer. So that's why Fort Washington for me is one. Not necessarily playing against that horse, but just a little worried this one maybe leaves itself a little too much to do coming for home. Laganos has at least a little bit more tactical speed to sit mid-pack. Finished third by less than a length last time out. Keeps Flavian Pratt up. Was nearly good enough to beat Brilliant Birdie and Mercante. So the fact that he was in the conversation there, and you're getting a better value on this one, you're getting twice the price on a Brilliant Birdie, and you're getting a little bit more than twice the price on Mercante from the morning line standpoint for trainer Steve Asmussen. I just think this one makes a lot of sense. Again, continues to improve as a 4-year-old. This is a horse I always liked a lot. Going back, honestly, to like the Transylvania and the American Turf, like this was always a horse I was a big fan of on the turf. So this one is just the one that's always hanging around. I try to always get this horse home. Horse I'm absolutely going to be using to try to beat Mercante in that late pick 5. Well, let's go to the headliner, and let's go to the Stephen Foster, the Grade 1, the mile and an eighth. And this is a Grade 1 race, folks. You got Sierra Leone, the reigning Breeders' Cup Classic winner. You got Mindframe coming off that victory in the Grade 1 Churchill Downs Stakes. You got First Mission coming off a 109 buyer speed figure. You got Hit Show coming off winning the Dubai World Cup. You got Mystik Dan, the Kentucky Derby winner, returning to Churchill Downs and winning the Blame Stakes last time out, and now coming back from that big win. You got a horse like Skippylongstocking, who just dances every dance for Safi Joseph Jr. You got a lot of good horses. Where am I going to go in this race? I'm playing against Sierra Leone as a top pick. I'm probably going to hedge in my verticals, and I'm going to have Mindframe and Sierra Leone as my 2 horses that I use in this leg. But Mindframe is my top choice. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Sierra Leone. It's so interesting. You say, does this horse need a setup? Because I don't think you're going to get a setup here. There's not a load of speed. Ashcroft's, might show some speed from the outside, but maybe not. Mystik Dan likes to track. Skippy's probably going to go to the front. First Mission, Mindframe, decent speed. But again, versatility from all these horses. They can come from off the pace. So you don't have a lot of horses that are going to battle each other, I don't think, up front. Does Sierra Leone need a pace setup? Well, it depends who you ask. On one hand, if you look at that Risen Star, you go, well, he closed behind 114 and change 6 furlong fractions. Slow that day. On the other hand, you go, is Track Phantom, Resilience, and Honor Marie in this race? No, we're facing a slightly better group of horses. So against better horses in grade 1 races, you look at the Bluegrass, you look at the Breeders' Cup Classic, the 2 grade 1s that he won last year. 110.83 to the 6 furlong in the Bluegrass, 109.44 in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Listen, I joked. Chad Brown should have bought Dermasotogake that day and just traveled the world with the two of them because he never got a better setup his entire life than Dermasotogake running ridiculously fast fractions up on the front end. Now, he won that race, though. And it should be pointed out, Sierra Leone's a horse that never got slower as a 3-year-old. And it was stunning in his career. 71, 91, 95, 98, 99, 99, 102, 109, 112. Hello. That's a hell of a horse. It's an amazing horse. There's also a lot of talk he doesn't like Saratoga, where he was your favorite in the Belmont, the Jim Dandy, and the Travers, and he lost all 3. And he comes back and wins that Breeders' Cup Classic. So he doesn't like Saratoga, maybe. He needs a setup, maybe. He's probably not going to get it here. In the New Orleans Classic, a very dull 3rd-place finish. But here's the thing. When I handicap turf races, what's one thing I always say? I always worry about deep closers coming off a long layoff. You wonder if that kick is still going to be there a lot of times. You think about it on the turf, you don't think about it on the dirt as much. But again, a horse that needs that closing kick, a little bit interesting. This horse has been training at Belmont. Chad knows he likes it up there. Sierra Leone's a temperamental horse. And so if he likes it at a certain place, you just keep him at a certain place. I think this horse is going to run a good race, a better race. But I still do wonder if maybe he leaves himself with a little too much to do. And maybe this is a tough field to do it against. I'm ultimately going to go to Mindframe. I don't even know what distance this horse is best at. 7, 8 furlongs, 8.5 furlongs, 9, 10 furlongs. I don't know. The horses run huge at every single distance. 4 for 6 winning, 6 for 6 in the exacta. The only reason the horse isn't perfect is because of Dornoch, who fought back both times he got past him in the Belmont and in the Haskell. And so if it wasn't for Dornoch, we'd probably be talking about Mindframe as being the top older male horse. And, but ultimately we're talking about him, hey, where's he going to do best? Who's the best of the stable between him and Fierceness? That Churchill Downs Stakes last time out, that was so impressive because normally he likes to track the pace from pretty close, length and a half, 2 lengths off the pace. In the Churchill Downs Stakes, he gets shuffled back to 8th. He's 4 lengths back at one point and makes up a sustained rally coming for home and gets there and beats Banishing, beats Nisos, beats Bookham Dano. Nisos comes back and crushes them in the Tropical Bend. Bookham Dano comes back to win the True Point over Mulligan, who, by the way, finished 5th that day in the Churchill Downs Stakes. Everybody's running back well from that race other than Banishing, honestly. And it seems like Mindframe's sitting on a big effort. This one I just think it's such a good horse. And Todd seems to just know how to get this one to run his best race. Seems like they've had a lot of maturity issues ironed out that you saw in the Belmont and the Haskell to some extent. I think the 2 turns is going to suit him fine. I think he sits the right trip just behind a horse like Skippy or First Mission. And that's going to be my top pick in this race. That's who I'm going to try to beat Sierra Leone with. Now, from a value standpoint, I don't love any of the value in this race. There's really not a lot of value because Ashcroft's such a big price and everybody else is basically 9-2 or less. Skippy, I love, but it's 6-1. Yes, underneath, sure. But, as a logical win contender, I just don't see him there. He's never won a grade 1. I think First Mission is going to be the horse that people look to as maybe a little bit of value. I do worry the last 2 times he ran career best buyer speed figures, he followed it up by regressing. In the Clark, he ran a 102 and nearly won, comes back in the Pegasus World Cup and runs an absolute nothing race there. Then he runs a 106 in the Ali Shiva last year at Churchill Downs, wins that race, and then comes back next time out in this race, the Stephen Foster, and runs a 96 and finishes 4th. So you saw a little bit of regression. Why do I bring this up? Well, last time out he runs a 109 in the Oaklawn handicap. Beats Banishing, beats Skippylongstocking, really dominant effort there. loses Flavien Prat, picks up Louis Saez, who's jockeyed him before to a couple of victories, particularly in the Grade 3 Lexington. But again, Flavian's on Sierra Leone. He knows what side his bread's buttered on. I don't blame him for that. But you could do a lot worse than pick out Louis Saez. I think First Mission is a bettable horse from a win standpoint. He's absolutely a horse you should consider thinking about using if you're going to try to beat Sierra Leone. He's going to sit the perfect trip on the inside rail. I think he's going to just track right behind a horse like Skippylongstocking, who might get out to the lead. And if he's not aggressive enough, Louis could put this horse on the lead as well. So a lot of versatility here for First Mission. Like this horse a lot. Little bit cautious on a couple of things, but gosh, you're probably going to get at least a decent price on him, because I think Mystik Dan's going to float up from that 3-1 morning line pretty significantly. I think Mindframe's going to end up being a second choice to Sierra Leone. First Mission should hang around that 4-1, 7-2 territory. Well, let's head out to the last race of the day, which is the American Derby, going a mile and a 16th on the turf for your 3-year-old males. And interesting race. From a pace standpoint, Freedom's Not Free, the number 8, could absolutely steal this thing up front, because there's really no other pace in this race. And, I already went to the well once with a West Coast horse coming east. I'm a little hesitant to do it here. I worry about, if you go 46-4, are you going to be able to finish up here and hold off this group like you did last time in the Cinema at Santa Anita? This turf course isn't Santa Anita. I do like the Omaha Beach influence up top. The Omaha Beaches have been running better and better on the turf, especially going long. And I think this one's dangerous at 7-2, for sure. For sure. But I'm going to try to beat this one and just think, I think they can catch him a little bit late. People are going to go to Tiztastic. To me, I need to see, and I understand Tiztastic's a great horse. Love Tiz the Law. Love this horse during the Derby Trail. Big fan of this one. But only 2 wins before the Louisiana Derby were on the turf, and people are going to zero in on that. But where were they? They were at Kentucky Downs. The way that I always handicap is, if a horse only wins on the turf at Kentucky Downs, I'm not going to use him. He's going to have to beat me outside of Kentucky Downs. If a horse has a bad effort at Kentucky Downs, you draw a line through it. It's just such an anomalous track. And as a result, it's hard to sometimes make these statements about what do you do with a horse like Tiztastic, who, by the way, did that as a 2-year-old when he won the allowance and then won the juvenile mile at Kentucky Downs 9 days apart from each other. So for me, he's a play against as the morning line favorite at 5-2. I don't know if he'll actually even go off as the morning line favorite, though it wouldn't shock me. Didn't run much in the Kentucky Derby and now gets back on the turf, has a turf work at Churchill Downs. Wasn't anything to write home about, 104-1 for the 5 furlongs. But still, Asmussen's taking this one back to the turf, which is clearly where he thinks his future probably is. So I get it, but I'm going to try to beat him. I'll beat him with Reagan's Wit. For Cherie DeVoe, coming out of that J.W. Murphy, looked so impressive that day. Was the 1-2 favorite, obviously. Disappointed in Transylvania as the 9-5 favorite before that. Didn't necessarily have the easiest trip that day. Was inside between a bunch of horses. But I like this one. I think showing a little bit more progression that J.W. Murphy. Now you're getting another start under its belt and a little bit more experience for this horse who's only had 5 lifetime starts. And again, 4 times in the exacta with 2 victories. I think this one, again, can continue to take a step forward, has enough speed to be able to sit more of a mid-pack trip, not going to leave itself too much to do, because that's the thing, is Tiztastic's more of a deep closer. And so I think Reagan's Wit, with maybe a limited amount of speed in this race, could sit a little bit more of a tactical race, saving a lot of ground on the inside. So at 3-1, that's where I'm going to go. For a price, Flying Mohawk's interesting. This is a horse that was on the come up for Whit Beckman, very famously 2-8 racing with Jason Worth there. Flying Puppy, I think, was the nickname there. Big Puppy was, of course, Dornock's nickname last year for that Worth gave him. But this one was, like I said, on the come up, had broken its maiden, and then comes back to win a $100,000 optional claimer off the bench, and goes to the Jeff Ruby Stakes and runs second to Final Gambit, who comes back to run 4th in the Kentucky Derby. But this one just runs a nothing race in that Kentucky Derby. But in some ways, I almost like that. I'd rather see this horse expend no energy and lose by 42.25 lengths than run 9th by 10.5 lengths and try the whole way, because you wonder if that maybe takes something out of the horse. When a horse turns in that bad of an effort in the Derby, you just draw a line through it. And I think this horse maybe gets back on turf, right at surface. Witt seems to have this one training well leading up to this race as well. Got back to the training track pretty quickly, which I always like to see as well out of that Derby. So this one, again, was able to come back to the training track on May 18th. So came out of the Derby in good shape, put in a bunch of series of good works leading up to this one. I think fitness is not an issue. I think Flying Mohawk at 8-1 gives you a nice little value in the bailout race. All right, folks, that is going to do it for me. It was light out when I started, and now it's getting a little bit darker. Anyway, it's getting dark at Rockaway Beach. But listen, I hope we all win a little bit at Churchill Downs this Saturday with those selections in the Stephen Foster Day card. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and going to be a lot of fun this weekend. So make sure to follow us on NYRA Bets. We're going to be covering cross country pick 5, Belmont at the Big A, Monmouth. We're going to be obviously Churchill Downs. We're going to got you covered coast to coast, worldwide. We're your one-stop shop for horse racing and handicapping. So press that like and subscribe button today. All right, friends. My name is Matthew DeSantis. Wishing you a great and profitable day at the races, and reminding you it's now post time.